So as I said, today is our sourcing capital session where we'll be exploring with the guidance of our friend Charity. We'll review some key insights from the first workshop. We'll explore specific types of capital in some more detail, and then we'll break out in groups to practice how to make the ask to potential partners, financial partners. And Charity, I'll pass on to you after our introductions, but if you'd like to say hi to folks already in the room, please feel free to unmute and greet
Thank
us.
you, Hannah. Just hello again to everyone, the returning folks and newcomers. Happy to have you here. And like Hannah said, I will give a very brief recap of our last workshop just to help orient everyone to the follow-on conversation that we're going to have today. But hopefully you're ready to be engaged and interacting in this session.
Awesome. Thank you, Charity. Excited for the second session here. And we also have in the call some of my colleagues from the Alliance helping out with all the back end. Sona, Jordan, Lakeisha. We might have a few more joining later, but thank you all for the work and the support here. And I'll start with just a brief overview of our time together. Starting out with this welcome and introductions, and then I've already shared a bit more about the Local Food Economy Lab in the past workshop, but quite a few folks are joining today for the first time. So we'll do a quick review of what the lab is, what we are mostly working in. And then we'll have Charity come in with the sourcing capital presentation. Well, she'll guide us over these topics, and then we'll break out into groups for practicing the ask. And then we'll come back into the main room to discuss the learnings and any questions you all might have before we close out our time together. I'll briefly introduce the Local Food Economy Lab, which is an initiative of the San Diego Food System Alliance that we co-designed with a group of advisors 5 years ago, where we heard directly from them what were the main needs and that we could support with for farmers, fishermen, food business owners. And then we created this initiative to be really focused on supporting the viability of these food entrepreneurs, small scale, local, and especially focus on those that have been historically left out of more traditional or conventional business support services. And it was, yeah, with this in mind, we always try to prioritize support to businesses that are led by Black, Indigenous, people of color, immigrants, low-income community members, refugees, among many other folks that we understand might have faced some barriers to receiving business support services. And within the lab, we work in several different areas. But here, this workshop, for instance, is part of our collaboration and learning efforts. We often play this role of connecting people, of bringing businesses together for collaboration, hosting events, hosting share spaces for learning, for solidarity in difficult times. And we have our YouTube channel where you can watch all our previous workshops, and including this one will be available there as well. We also have our business stewardship and coaching area where we have our pollinator program that we just closed for applications. We are now in the selection process for the 5th cohort of pollinator. We also have in the meeting several folks that are or were a part of the program in the past. And we also help folks in different ways, trying to connect people with the right resources or right partner organizations. We have resource libraries with lots of good information. We have the Rhizome listserv, which I believe most of you now are a part of and are receiving some of the grant opportunities we share often, and really try to foster the communication of these food entrepreneurs. And yeah, and the work of the lab in general seeks to nurture community wealth building, economic models, cooperative development, having more community governed businesses. So we're really trying to foster an ecosystem that is more favorable to these collaborative governed businesses. And then through our land tenure and stewardship initiative, we're now working with partners and advisors to envision and to seed a community agricultural land trust in the region. And finally, the community capital area, this workshop is also very related to that. We are always trying to help businesses access more flexible and affordable capital. We have a lending partnership that currently offers a credit building loan. If any of you is interested, you can let us know and we can help you out access that credit building loan later. And that's all. So with all that said, I would love to pass on to Charity, our presenter today, for her to introduce herself in more detail and lead us through the workshop.
Great. Thank you, Hannah. And again, just a wonderful big thank you to the San Diego Food System Alliance for partnering with me to bring this two-part series on capital and capital nourishment. I know many of you are returning, though there might be a few new folks. So I'll briefly just say that a couple of streams that bring me to this work of even talking about the diverse forms of capital and how they work and how they can be available for your enterprise, whether you are a for-profit entity or not operating as a nonprofit. Capital is a resource, just as knowledge is a resource, experience, these are all resources. You'll hear me talk about those components as capital or assets as well that each of you also hold. But I'm here. I'm a daughter of small business owners. I myself am an entrepreneur. I started my career in the traditional investment world, finance and investment world. So my perspective is that there is plenty. There is always enough, but making sure that, especially financial resources and capital flow to our communities and to our community leaders and to the bright leaders like yourselves is the work that I've been doing over the last few years through my advisory and design practice, Sacred Futures, of designing new ways in which capital can move and flow and be in right relationship with our land, with the earth, and also with us as people as well. So moving from non-extractive measures that I'm sure each of us have had some form of an experience with, whether that's a personal money story or even related to your operation, but moving that to a more wholesome, more regenerative, more nourishing model. So that is a little bit about me, and I am here in San Diego, so I am so looking forward to being able to participate in the good food and food experience that you all are bringing together. Um, so next slide, Hannah, if you don't mind, I want to give just a very brief overview of what we talked about during the last workshop, and we were focused very much on can we demystify the language and our understanding of what it means to work with financial capital in particular. And the three questions that we walk through um, are here on this slide. But the first one really being acknowledging that your operation, your enterprise can be operating in various states at the same time. And I'll go to that slide in just a minute. But you might be uh, building and needing working on establishing systems and operations, putting your team together, um, or building out your your farm enterprise. You may be looking at opportunities to grow. So as you are sourcing opportunities to develop to build out your revenues, you might be in a state of growing while also looking to expand as well. That could be expanding into a new line of operations of business, or expanding within the physical sense of moving to a new building or needing to grow outside of the building that you're in, or land. And the fourth state being repair. There are external factors um, that we have zero control over that can impact our state. And so understanding these states as you're moving and flowing through them, depending as you understand your operation over time, that can help with understanding what type of capital is right and good and appropriate for that particular need that you have at that state. That's the kind of the idea of the framework there. And then we talked about how do you identify what type of capital is right for me? And I shared that example of um, really understanding the state that your business is in, and then being able to map to that. And I'll show you in a little bit later. I'll pull up one of the examples and slides, but one of we walk through a few different examples, from purchase order financing to your probably what you're typically used to hearing about for a business loan might be a longer term, like 3 to 5 years, or even 7 year term loan. We also talked about equity and ways in which community members can participate in economic interests of your business, and what are some of the things that you need to think about and be aware of for all these different forms, whether it's business loans, community capital, and being ready to utilize and source these various forms. So in this workshop, what we're going to do is go a little bit deeper into purchase order financing and community investment opportunities. As there was expressed quite a bit of interest in understanding those a little bit more, and there are actually two really great examples on the spectrum, right? Of like really small, it can be a smaller source of capital for a really specific need at a particular state of your business, um, all the way to raising a larger amount of capital from the community that you are moving and interacting with. And that could be used for land acquisition, to acquire a building, equipment. So it can be any size, but if you're thinking about, well, from the spectrum of 10,000, 50,000, all the way up to 250,000 or even more for more larger scale projects, it'll give us a good range to explore. So I'll dive into those specifically, and then I'll talk a little bit more. We'll kind of zoom back out and talk a little bit more about how do you even begin to articulate what your invitation is. And I'm using the term invitation as opposed to ask, because sometimes, well, actually, many times in the conversation related to capital, there's an inherent power dynamic that's at play, right? Like, you don't have the money, you need money, and somebody who has the money, and you have to ask them for the money. Is it begging? And part of demystifying and really bringing a wholeness to that that element, that landscape, is for you to feel empowered, and um, for you to hold the agency of owning your story, of owning your operation, and owning the journey that you're taking with your business, your enterprise, your nonprofit, and where you're wanting to go. So for as like your customers might feel affinity for being a part of the work that you're doing. We can also talk to funders and investors and lenders in that same way and encourage them to have that take that position of being invited to the table. So you'll get to we'll talk about how do you set the table and talk and practice articulating that invitation together. We're in a depending on the number of folks that we have together, we might break out in a few breakout rooms for that, as Hannah mentioned. But then we'll come back together and spend a good amount of time opening it up for questions and responses. I would love to hear really really specific and pertinent to your experiences and as you come out of that practice, what are those invitations or the ask and what might be the next step that you need assistance with and for us to kind of just create a safe shared space of learning together. So that's a little bit of a deep dive into what we're going to flow into next. So Hannah, if you can move to the next slide. Oh, this really briefly, I mentioned these are the states of um, where your business might be. So again, that stabilizing, getting started, or establishing your footprint and repair. I know many of you have expressed having experience sourcing grants and other unrestricted sources of funding. Um, Oftentimes, when those funding sources are available, those are a great match for emergency care that you might need, or for that initial upfront type of investment to get yourself established and getting to that place of growing and expanding. One thing that I talk about when looking at the landscape, one of the phrases we use is integrated capital. So again, grants, loans, equity, all these different forms of capital coming together to nourish enterprise. Um, your enterprise is going on a journey, and so the different forms and sources of capital are supporting and facilitating moving from what maybe started as a project, maybe it didn't start as a project, but maybe it started as a concept, as an idea. You seeded, you watered, you invested in it, but eventually it's building towards an enterprise where where you have employees or contractors, where you are at the table potentially negotiating larger contracts with other partners in the ecosystem. And so as you are moving on that spectrum, the growing and expanding is often forms of different types of loans and different structures for equity can make a lot of sense to support the business on that journey. Um, so let's get into it. Or maybe I should pause and just see if there are any questions from folks. This is your first time joining us, or from those who are returning. Anything that I can clarify before we dive into purchase order financing? Okay, I don't think I see hearing none. We'll just keep going. So thank you, Cynthia. Love the hands up. This was an example that I shared in our previous workshop about naming an asset that you have. Again, I think the framing is just really, really important, right? So you might be, um, you might be thinking, "Well, I don't have the capital to, I don't have the capital to do X, Y, and Z." But always taking a pause and taking a step back and say, well, what do I have? What resources do I have that I can use to navigate and source for the next stage? And so in the food and farming business, one scenario might be that let's say you are a farmer and you can produce a large volume of a particular specialty produce. Or you are at another part of that supply network and you developed a product that is sourcing ingredients, sourcing from the region, and um, you are negotiating a larger contract with what folks might call like an institutional buyer. So it could be a hospital, it could be a school, it could be a retailer, and that who, or even a distributor. They're going to want to purchase at scale a larger amount of product from you. And in this instance, a purchase order financing can support you when you have not yet fulfilled that order, and you need the capital to invest in that larger amount of for production. So your need is working capital to fulfill this order and potential ongoing orders as well. So how does that work? And the question is, I have an order, but I need money to fulfill it. So how does that work? So if we go to the next slide, kind of laid it out step by step visually for you. What is happening? Who's responsible for what? And what does it look like in terms of how the capital typically flows through a purchase order financing? So first step is you have a buyer that says, "Hey, I want to commit to an agreed price for this volume." You get that in writing and you go to identify a capital partner. I think one capital partner that's named in at least in the state of California that can do this, but there are other banks and other specialized of funders as well that do this work. But California Farm Link was one that was named. You go to the lender, and they'll typically want to see that purchase order, that commitment, and also understand what are the supplies that you need to fulfill that order, having a good sense of the quotes for that, and probably and most likely just basic business financials from your enterprise. The way that purchase order financing typically works is that the lender will lend you 70% up to even 90% of that value to cover your input costs. And in most cases, they will want to pay for the supplies directly. Um, Once you receive the supplies, you're able to produce and you deliver the goods. Then you invoice the buyer. Say, time to pay me. That'd be great. Um, what happens typically when you have that purchase order financing in place is that the payment, the cash flow, will actually flow from the buyer directly to the lender. And the lender will charge some sort of fee, a percentage of the amount borrowed. That's what we can call their advance fee for using this service. After the repayment of the balance that was borrowed, less that fee, that is what your profit would be, and the lender distributes that directly to you. And the order is complete. I think I mentioned this already, but this type of capital loan financing can work really well with farms that are working through seasonal harvests and sourcing buyers to purchase large volumes of the produce or products that you are growing. Food businesses that are looking to fulfill wholesale and institutional orders as well. One of the things that lenders like to see is the credit worthiness of the actual buyer. So you won't typically see this used for a direct to consumer type of order. Um, Manufacturing and growing businesses that need to, yeah, manufacturers that need to purchase in bulk and growing businesses that um, are moving really fast and maybe they had a cash reserve but need that additional financial capital to support them. One thing I wanted to note, so again, language is really important. And so you might hear in the conversations related to this type of financing, if it works for you, is the term invoice factoring. Invoice factoring is similar, but it's at a different stage. It's a related tool, but typically is after the delivery. So let's say you've fulfilled an order, you have submitted an invoice, but time is ticking, you have yet to be paid, and you're in a cash flow crunch. You can go to a lender, and that would typically be an invoice factoring to receive the value of that invoice upfront from the lender or financing company before your your customer or buyer actually pays you. Let's say they were supposed to pay you in 30 days. Now it's 60 days, 90 days. You need that cash flow up front. So very similar, but works at a different state or stage of the journey of fulfilling an order. Um, I'll pause there just to see if there are any questions. Cynthia.
Hello there, Cynthia, Johnny. Yeah, I was just looking over this purchase order financing and just had some questions about um if the lender um is paying for just your supplies, they're paying that up front to, you said, directly to the supplier? You said they usually typically like to do that? So they're not literally paying you any of those dollars necessarily. They're not coming to you. That's not something that goes from them to your bank account for you to purchase anything. Is that my understanding of that?
My so when I say typically, yes, so this is what I have seen, and I don't know if it's necessarily a rule, but from a the term I'm going to use is from a certainty standpoint. That is one way in which a lender can ensure that the funds are used for what has been agreed upon. Um, and it can also be a way in which to support the rapid turnaround and the speed in which the purchase order financing can be put in place. Because if you think of, I'm going to use an example of a longer term financing. So if you a term loan, you typically would get all the funds up front, wired directly into your bank account. The the process, the review process, application process can take some time. It might take 3 months. It might take, hopefully it doesn't take longer than 3 months, but in some cases,
Right.
it's a much longer timeline because the lender is getting to know you, getting to understand your business operations, um, ensuring that your projected cash flows make sense for making the long-term payments back on that loan. So the timeline is a bit longer, but you are once you reach an agreement and you sign the loan documents, you will receive that lump sum fund in full into your bank account. With purchase order financing, it's a very much shorter time frame because you're bringing essentially the security of I have a buyer, this is what they're ordering, this is where the cash flows are going to come from, and it's one mechanism that, again, I'm sharing facts here,
Oh,
just in terms of typically how it works, where the flow of the capital or the flow of the funds, the lender is supporting you in making those payments directly. It's possible um, that another way, and I've seen this done more with other loan types. Sometimes uh, lenders might ask for there to be a separate account that holds funds in place. So I'm veering off from purchase order financing a little bit, but to give you another example, Cynthia, of just other tools that lenders might utilize to um, they might utilize to support their credit committee for getting comfortable with the ask and the financials and moving things through. Um, you might see that happen sometimes too. Well, they will ask for what they'll call it maybe an escrow account.
Mm.
Um, that the lender can see and has access to, and for the funds to flow through there, as opposed to essentially writing a check and that going directly to the business.
Okay.
Does that
So
answer your question?
it does, and it just, of course, it sparks more, but I don't want to spend too much time just anchored here. But I kind of want to get an understanding of, because maybe it's just true that, progress leads with the amount of trust that's developed there. But
Yeah.
the lender, if they're going to the supplier, are there, I guess it's based on the paperwork, how that's structured, because maybe you use a specific supplier, and this is you know, the brand or whatever that's used for this, let's say it's recipe, or this is the kind of seeds or whatever the kind of thing. Do they go there, or do they get to choose where they buy, you know, these things from, since they're holder of the money and they're directly paying for it?
That's a great question. You would be providing where you're sourcing your materials from to fulfill the order.
Okay.
So that would not, yeah, that would not be a decision that the lender
Okay.
makes in terms of you needing to.
It just makes it sound totally subjective. But okay. I'm good. That gives me good insight. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Anyone else before I move on? Okay. So we're going to move into the next category here. Yeah, just go the other way. Yes. So share with you that example, very specific, very tight process can move relatively quickly for meeting a financial ask. On the other spectrum, and this was an example that we walked through briefly during last week's, I'm sorry, during the last workshop, where you have I'm going to use the term just more complex, a more complex operation. You have land, you're acquiring land, you're building infrastructure, maybe it's processing infrastructure. There are a lot of different operations that are coming together that would require more capital, larger at a larger scale. And so the highlighted hexagon here is showing obviously a blended capital sourcing, from grants to those long-term term loans, acquisition financing. But the one we're going to dive into a little bit more, because it's probably the most like, what is this and how would this actually work? And is there actually room for me to even consider, is the community investment. Community investment. One of the things that, one of the questions that we raised around recognizing if community investment is a route for you to go, is taking inventory of your relationships and the people that you are doing business with or adjacent to. And again, I mentioned this earlier about, it's part of it is forming an invitation for people to participate in what you're doing, whether that's specific financing for equipment or for a buyer commitment agreement, all the way to maybe more expansive, inviting community members to participate in this vision of impact and creating food sovereignty, security in a community. So I want you to think about the the likely use cases for this. Again, the range can vary, but when you are looking to source a larger amount of dollars, um, it is an opportunity to explore how your community can participate. And I just want to prep you that um, we're going to get a little technical, but there's a reason why we're going to get a little technical, and then we'll come back up to the butterfly filling. But I want you to walk away with enough understanding, enough to be dangerous. But when you decide to go a route like this of inviting, I mean, we're talking about community capital. So when you look into an opportunity like this, you will have a good understanding of the tools, the language, and be well resourced to connect with advisors and even legal support to make it happen. So the next slide is answering a couple of questions. Community investment is essentially we're talking about a community investor. And when we use the term investor, that means that we are um, giving someone, an individual, the opportunity to receive a financial benefit from putting money into your venture or your operation. And with that, our uh, government, state, and federal have very specific rules in which how to to do that and what language to use, how to communicate about it, in part because the they are wanting to they want to protect and ensure that people are not being taken advantage of. So I want everyone to make an informed decision that they are investing and that there are risks. One risk being that you might not get your investment back, but you might. But the risk being that you may not get your investment back, how do we ensure that you are making an informed decision? So, to make some complicated securities law and understanding as simple and bite-sized as possible, two lenses that you can think about when it comes to community investment is who are you inviting to participate? And the Securities Exchange Commission sees two buckets. One is accredited and the other is not accredited. And I apologize if this is a little too small on the screen, but the definition is looking at three factors: the income level of that participating investor, the lovely to see you, ma'am. Thank you for coming. Um, the professional credentials and their total net worth. And so I have listed here, uh, again, this is at a high level, but what those distinguishing factors are. What you need to essentially take, we'll get into why this matters in the next slide. But another thing to take away is when you are inviting community members to invest, whether it's debt or equity, if there is an opportunity for them to receive, even if it's just interest payments or dividend payments, that could be considered a security. And the Securities Exchange Commission just has general rules, but also exemptions. And that's what we're going to focus on in the next slide. That one well-known exemption is that if you are organized as an agricultural co-op, you are often exempt from needing to report or even follow, yeah, to report and register when you are issuing shares to your members of your agricultural cooperative. So that's one example of an exemption where um, it doesn't have to be as complicated. Um, I am going to, yeah, dive into the
Can
next. Oh,
can
yes.
I ask you a
Ellie.
nitty-gritty question?
Yes.
Um, so we our co-op is a multi-stakeholder co-op, which is both producers and workers. Do you know if there's any difference between um like in that layer as far as being a producer or an agricultural co-op?
Yes. So thank you for that question. You might need to, I'm more than happy to follow up to clarify the response that I give you. Because like multi-stakeholder cooperatives, typically you you might have two different types of shares that you're offering, right? So there are governing rights, there are economic rights that typically come with shares. So in your public companies, your C corporations, those two things are typically the same. So when you buy common stock in a company, you get to vote and which is your decision making right as an investor, but you also are promised some sort of return. And it's typically based on the amount of money that you have invested in the company. With multi-stakeholder cooperatives, you can tier that, right, Ellie? In terms of the types of share. You might have one class of shares for the producers. They have different, it may vary in terms of their decision making and economic interests. When it comes to, so those are, those are being made available to the members of the cooperative as opposed to being broadly distributed. So I think that is one distinction that covers the cooperative operating within its appropriate framework that you are selling the shares to your members. Um, it might. I know of a few. I know of one co-op that. Ooh, that's a really good question. I'm going to finish this one thought, and then Michael, you asking to elaborate about getting startup investment back from the investment options back. I might ask you to elaborate on that a little bit. Um, One cooperative who, and this is one of the exemptions, they obviously had their worker owned shares, but they had a separate class of shares. They were kind of the first of their kind, equal exchange. Maybe some of you have heard of them. You might know how they move in the space. Um, they did a direct public offering. So this is the first time that they were going externally out, right? From and raising capital from, um, we can call them community members. So the direct public offering, there is a process. There were are some exemptions, but a process for providing disclosures. But they were also really creative in terms of um, what economic interests they gave external investors versus the workers and the members inside the co-op. So a lot of creativity there, but it was technically a direct public offering. So, and it falls within one of the exemptions that we'll talk about. Michael, can I ask you to elaborate a little bit on your question? And I don't know if you might still be on mute. I hope I'm not seeing you there.
Looks like he's multitasking. There he is.
Okay. Well, Mike, happy to return to your question. I see Brandon, you are asking a question about what point is it most appropriate or would be successful given the scale of your need, which is over 4 million. And could we offer any type of return on investment that would mean something to the micro community investors? Take care, Shannon.
I know that was kind of a long-winded question. I can simplify it.
It's actually a perfect segue into the next slide. But if there's anything else you'd like to highlight before we go into
No,
helping
no,
you
I
figure
was
out which
actually
way to go.
I was talking to one of my team members in a separate chat who's also on here, Miss Sona, and this is one of the questions we had because we have such a big capital campaign, and then we don't even know what we would bring in that would be an attractive ROI to somebody, grandma who says I'm going to put in $100, or theoretically. So
Yeah, maybe one question for your capital raise. Do you have a good sense of what the um, business model or the kind of the long-term revenue generation would be?
it's a pretty complicated project, so we're working on that. It's multi-components, but it's a combination of grocery store, food vendors, an agro urban ag center, and a garden. But everything we do is in food production. But there's also low margins in a lot of that.
Yeah.
So we're still working on that.
Makes sense. Well, let's go to the next slide and see if this helps. This conversation will help a little bit and unpack some of those pieces. So with the community investment, high level steps are exactly, Brendan, the question that you just raised in terms of defining your capital raise. What are you seeking to fund a specific project? How much do you need in total? How much runway do you have to run the campaign? Thinking, so again, if you have a more complicated project where you have different phases and different things that will be coming online, what is the duration of how much money you'll need before X comes online? And so being able to get a sense of how long your campaign needs to be. And then this gets to that question too of, well, what repayment period might you need as well, right? So 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, longer term, 20 years. Those are all questions to grapple with and think about. That's tied to the vision, but also your business plan and projections. So with raising capital from community, there are a few exemptions, and you'll have to give me feedback later if this helps simplify it a little bit. There are a lot of rules, but what's important is the rules are primarily around, again, communication. So in some cases, using this first example, a friends and family raise, you can absolutely privately go to your parents, go to your other community members, and have what they call a private placement, but put a promissory note. Say someone wants to put in 5,000, someone wants to put in 10,000, but it's a private um, private occurrence. You're not marketing it publicly. There are limits to how many non-accredited investors. So we talked about the net income and those sorts of things. You just want to be mindful of that. But that's, in terms of simplicity of executing, you could probably do that tomorrow, but it may only get you to a certain amount of capital. So then we move to, well, I want to raise 250,000, 500,000. I would like to actually share the narrative and the story online, but I don't want to deal with other reporting requirements. So one exemption allows you to keep it local. So you could raise community investment from California residents. You live here, you're talking to the whole state of California. There's an exemption for that. It allows you to keep it local, and you target your communications online to um, find those residents that maybe don't live next to you but want to participate. The next exemption, a little bit more sophisticated or complicated, is the direct public offering I mentioned to you. Equal Exchange as a cooperative did that. There are many other examples of direct public offerings, which is essentially you're going directly to the community. Um, the federal rule says you can raise up to 10 million under a direct public offering within a 12-month round. This also is extending beyond California. So that's where some of the complexity comes in, where again, legal support will guide you on all of these components. But certain states may have specific limitations that you would want to be mindful of if you go at the scale of a direct public offering beyond outside the state of California. Then there is the universe of crowdfunding, regulation CF. Online crowdfunding, there's actually been a lot of work to democratize the law around crowdfunding since, I think it was since 2020. So it used to be you could only raise $1 million, but now it's up to 5 million. And there are quite a few online portals that have been developed. And these portals are required to be registered. So, but if you use the online portal, and I have two examples here, WeFunder and Honeycomb Credit. These are just examples for you to explore. And there are examples of other folks who have used the model. So you can look at their fundraising, their capital raising campaign, anywhere from $100 to $2,500 in terms of ticket sizes. But the online portals they have to be registered, and they hold they hold that piece for you, which takes the burden off, but also again allows you to go a little larger than if you were to try to keep it local and not utilize an online crowdfunding platform. Ellie, your question is asking, do they allow you to easily back away if you don't reach your fundraising target? I think so. That I know is a challenge with like a Kickstarter, right? So with the crowdfunding portals, I'll be honest with you, might need to look at each individual one in terms of how the campaign works. I don't, I think it's different because but I wouldn't be able to tell you specifically exactly how. But it is a bit different because when you're raising investment dollars, these are real investment dollars. The folks are participating in the success of your business, as opposed to just getting perks in exchange. So a Kickstarter, typically you're raising money, but you're saying, okay, you're they're essentially buying various perks. With a WeFunder and Honeycomb Credit, there's a legal document that people are signing saying that I'm investing in your company. So a little bit different in that way. That's actually a good segue into the third step. So once you, with support from Mission Align legal counsel and due diligence, you get a sense of where you'd like to start for the exemption. The next step would then to be essentially sharing your story. So preparing what they call it an offering memorandum, and that's the document that includes the disclosures, includes remember I mentioned that the that it's important to name the risk related to, like, you may not get your funding back and here's why, and all those things are shared in the offering memorandum, and it includes your business plan, your financial projections, and all of those pieces. That then prepares you to be able to launch and raise the funds from your community and beyond. And then you deploy and steward that. And so staying in communication with your investors along the way. Brandon, I know you mentioned a question around what type of return on investment. This is where, again, there is actually a lot of creativity in terms of what the terms are that you offer. There are no legal rules related to that. So I've seen community land trusts do a community investment round and offer 3% for an interest over 5 years. So that's where understanding your margins, understanding um, your projections and what makes sense. And also think about this as one piece of the whole picture. It could be that you think that a community investment round is helpful because you can mobilize a lot of people really fast to secure property or to do the construction build out, and that gives you time to stabilize before you go talk to a bank to actually get permanent financing for the structure, where a bank might be less interested in taking on that construction risk. um, Community investment round, it allows you to kind of place it in the capital pancake stack, as it were, where it could really help you leverage other types of funding, other types of capital as well. Um, so yeah, and I think that's another way to think about too, that return on investment. It may not, if even if you can't necessarily promise a high percentage, the folks who are committing, they're committing because of the mission, relationship impact, and knowing what a potential exit might be for them or transition to seal the deal. You may find folks that want to reinvest or keep their capital in the project as well.
Wonderful, thank you. I always wonder too, is there also curious ways to or interesting ways to pivot as opposed to not just maybe equity or giving out interest, but they get a different relationship with now or our organization, whether it's discounted pricing on in perpetuity, or something like that, to where we don't have to say we're giving out of our excess, but maybe you get a different relationship with us. But thanks for that clarity.
Yeah, I love that creativity there as well. Um, any other questions? I know this is probably maybe a little bit more heady than you were anticipating, but I hope it's helpful, and want to see if there are any other questions or anything else that I can clarify before um, we transition.
Charity, we have the question from Michael that maybe I know.
Yes.
Yeah, Michael, would you like to elaborate on that question, or was that something that was answered in different ways?
Well, kinda in different ways. I was when you mentioned um uh getting investment back, when I went into it, the first thing I got the job to invest everything I was working for into this, but I wanted my money back, you know, and I
Mhm.
figured I'd get my money back before I officially say I'm going into business. It doesn't kind of work like that. I really don't know if I ever get that investment back. Uh, we just move forward. But are there options, or what type of options are there for seeking what you've invested in it? perhaps getting a percentage of it back through loans or something to
Hmm.
keep you going. Is that an option? Um, I
Yes, thank
just
you.
didn't hear the options for.
Yeah, no, thank you for elaborating on that. And I am hearing you say that you for your business, obviously you've put in not just sweat equity, but your capital in your business. And
Yes.
so at what point would you be able to essentially either take that capital back out of the business or it it be it be considered um equity that has a value that over time if you yeah, if you're looking for liquidity for your investment in your business. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Um,
yeah, a little different than this part of the conversation, but what I can say to that is um it typically would not be a loan. It's a little more nuanced in that oftentimes founders that put in that startup equity, they look to retain their percentage of ownership as the value of the company grows or changes, or as you bring in other investors into the business. So when you have, that's what they would call it a liquidity event. So let's say that you want to bring in other equity investors. At that time would be the space to explore um a some portion or percentage or return of capital to you from your initial investment. And that would require
got it.
yeah, valuation, but it would be in the liquidity. You're asking for liquidity, bringing on other investors um to seed that capital into your business. That would be a good opportunity for you to potentially liquidate. That might change um yeah, how you think about decision making for the business and those sort of things, but yeah. The other moment would
Okay.
be an exit if you ever decided that you wanted to transfer the business to another owner. That's oftentimes when founders and business owners can also see a return on their initial investment. Is that helpful?
Okay. I had another question.
Yes, please go ahead.
How do you, or is there a best way to test how much community support or social capital you have?
Hmm. I love that. That's a really good question. Is that how you could test, right? The interest
Yes. Uh, it's yes. Yes.
before committing to a raise. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I
I know
think
there's
go ahead.
community support, little social capital, but how do I reach it in whole? Is there a plan? That's what I'm working on in my head and mind already. So how do I gather that support that might have been 5 years ago or 3 years ago
Mhm.
and bring it together with what you have now in a collaborative way,
Yeah.
uh, uh, where you do it individually and personally, but you bring it together as a group. I That's just how I was thinking. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Michael. Honestly, I don't know if part of that question is as an operational question. It's just in terms of how do you hold on to contacts and steward those relationships as you grow and expand and people come and go. Um, but I think you're absolutely right that the relationships that you've developed over the years, if you have a good if you have kind of a system in place to support staying in communication with those folks, then one-off conversations or even just kind of being curious, knowing what you need, of course, and what you're trying to what your next stage um, is really important.
Hmm.
But I have I have yet to see how one just so much could transpire, so many resources, a lease for a new restaurant business, land, an opportunity to expand land, somebody coming in to buy a separate business. So many of those. Um, it's not through the far wide outreach, the wide net. It's often through the close relational conversations that occur. It does take work, but if you already have that skill set, then it's cultivating it and maybe putting a few systems in place to steward it well.
Thank you. That has been very helpful. It turn on light bulbs. Uh, Next stage invitation to community.
Yes.
Thank, okay.
That's so wonderful. Maybe that's actually a great segue. And I just want to do a quick time check. I love actually that we are a more intimate group. So Hannah and Sona, I'm kind of adapting a little bit. Um we might seek to just do this all together instead of breakout groups,
Mhm.
since we have a more intimate group, which I think is wonderful. So maybe extending, Michael, from your conversation, this articulating the invitation. You mentioned social capital. Um, I said this a little earlier, but being aware of the resources and assets that you are nurturing, that you have nurtured over time, the story of who you are. This is not all inclusive, but it includes your relationships. It includes the information, the actual skill and information, knowledge that you've cultivated over time in the craft that you are um, involved in, the financial assets, the actual kind of business revenue generating or uh, raising grant funds for investing in other mission aligned projects. There's also your cultural experience and knowledge, your stories, and then there's the built environment too. That's what I mean by materials, but the built environment, whether you have access to land, you have um, food truck, you have a storefront, the actual physical assets are also a part of the resources that you are bringing to the table. So these questions are to support you in naming. I Other people will use the term pitch. I personally don't. I think it's more relational than that, right? You sharing who you are, why you're doing what you're doing, what's bringing you to the business or our enterprise that you are leading, that naming that purpose, but then also setting the vision for folks. Michael, you were kind of getting to that a little bit about, okay, you've come a long way. So, and where are you going? Because that gives community members, lenders, other investors a sense of the journey that you're inviting them to take on. And then this question, the blue circle, what do you need for each state? Again, this is offering of a framework for you to think about what are the specific assets that you need in to stabilize, to grow, to expand, to repair. And I know we're talking about raising or sourcing financial capital, but you can also name what other non-financial resources you need in those various stages. And I think that collective, that comprehensive view can be really helpful for articulating the ask, articulating the invitation. And this piece on how do you want to set the table, that's where you state and name, well, I am looking for community members who want to invest in the expansion of this production part of the production facility, or I am looking for a lender who can provide capital for me to purchase this equipment. I am looking for a thought partner who has this particular type of experience. So by setting the table, you're naming the like I said, you're naming that invitation for folks to sign up and join and be a part. Hannah, before I open it up, I want to just quickly go to the next slide. And as we said, we will share these slides with you. But the action plan I love for everyone to think about is these are a few areas for you to think about investing time in for next steps. Where do you need to refine your invitation in terms of the ask? And you can use those questions and the naming of the assets that I just walked through as for support for that. Identify any gaps. Are there gaps in maybe identifying the gaps, whether that's in the business model or in the resources or access to the right type of partners. Naming those up front is important. But also challenge yourself to just to begin to ask, to have that conversation. Interview partners. Is it a community member? Is it using San Diego Food System Alliance lender database and resource to just get to know folks, to get a sense of if they might be a good fit for you to explore. And interviewing is absolutely a part of it. There's no requirement to make a commitment, and it needs to fit and align with what you're seeking. But then that next step would be to actually to make at least just one ask after you have developed this action plan. Can go back to the other slide, but yeah, wow, that time went by so fast. I'm going to just pause and open it up for more questions, or if there's anyone who has a specific example, another specific example where we can explore articulating this invitation with you together and resourcing. Would love to spend the rest of our time supporting you in that.
And if it makes sense, Charity, we can also paste in the chat those questions you have put up. Can I do that?
Yes, I just did. I still had it saved in my copy page.
Yeah, those questions are a good takeaway as well on how to think about the action plan, right?
Yeah. Any, um, no, Michael, Brandon, Elliot, really appreciated your questions and specific examples that you're bringing up. I found that to be really helpful. And Cynthia, you as well. Um, want to see if there are anything else that's feeling fuzzy, or maybe would you like to share one takeaway that in terms of something you feel like you might want to look into a little bit deeper, or even the action plan
Well,
Uh,
segments? What's resonating? Is that
I,
Michael or Brandon?
that was probably two people. It was me also and somebody else. I'll just say it was very informative. So thank you again, Charity. I really want to take this back to our director and see what she thinks. See, everything we do is all about community. So I think if this is offered right, it could be interesting. We have such a big raise that I don't really, it'd be, but I would love to take this back. So I appreciate all the information.
Awesome.
and for me, it was very helpful as well when you just mentioned action plan and redefining the invitation. It was basically answering my question from earlier about the best way to approach it. So
Mm,
it just came together and light bulbs started going on and you start taking notes and it was a boost and very helpful.
excellent. I'm excited for you, Michael. That's so great to hear.
Can just echo the fellows, but I think what is really helpful for me is understanding some of those details for
Mm,
the securities, the different type of areas, and what actually fits your organization or project. I definitely will be chasing you down, Miss Charity, for some of the other work that I'm doing. I think it's going to be
mhm,
really important. I think you might be just the person because you've worked in that arena, with securities and the broker, all that stuff. Um, because those are the pieces that we as laymen and just business owners we don't know
yeah.
you know we really don't know that part, and I think I'm looking at it and I said, what, we should really know this from the get-go, you know
Mm, mhm.
of what is appropriate. What did you call it? Find um your
Exemption.
exemptions. Find
Yeah.
your exemptions. Yes, those were really important, and I think vital for some of the projects that are even going on right now, where we have other people who take it. They'll hire the legal counsel, of course, but we never, I think, a lot of times don't take the time to learn and even understand those pieces
Yeah.
ourselves, and then we're looking crazy when things go south. But sometimes it's because of some of these very pieces that you're educating us on right now. So, Godspeed you, and I appreciate it. And it, like Michael said, it just has a lot of perks off a lot of other questions and how can we's and those kind of things. So I
Good.
appreciate your presence here. Thank you.
Mm, my honor. And you're just to underscore that, you're absolutely right. I think that's the financial and even the real estate world can use law and language as a weapon to
Right?
not allow access. But when you flip it, they can also be used to be as creative as possible within the frameworks that we're moving in. So, yeah, offering that offering that to you all, and especially for those who have the curiosity. How do we make this work?
I think it's good to know too that you can be creative and get creative with some of these things if you know the rules,
Right.
right? That part
Just
right
the
there.
things.
I'm looking at Brandon saying, "Bro, you can do 4 million." You know, it looks
No
like me like there's
problem.
some creative ways to do that. Brandon, Michael, there's some ways that you can really do that. It's just getting a better understanding and having someone in your camp that can, lead you along through the forest. You know,
Yes,
so
ma'am.
Yes. I say.
Thank you all. Oh yes, Chris, I see your note here, the reframing of the invitation. Yeah, and the conditioning of being afraid to invest and inviting others because we don't want to lose their money. Yeah, I totally hear you. And the more that yeah, we recognize it's a journey we're going on together. Um, we're stewarding, but there's more to be lost outside of that. Not saying don't just throw people's money away. I'm not saying that, but there's money in addition to so many other things. So yeah, I think we're here at the end.
Yeah.
And want to again just thank you for the opportunity. And I'm excited to hear about how we all get to invest in these projects that are on the other side. I'll pass it back to you, Hannah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Charity, for another incredible session. Lots of information. We will be sending the recording and the slides, and I guess even for myself, I'll be able to listen to again to really take it in, all this valuable information. But thank you so much, Charity. Thank you all that attended. You'll be receiving an email from us, and we'll stay in touch.